Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So as you can see here, this is the Porsche 997 engine. And as you can see, it's located in the rear of the car. Today we're going to be removing this engine to drop it down so we can have it all torn down. So that way we can fix the bore score problem and have the cases sent off to have that addressed. Now I'm going to be showing you how you remove that, and obviously I'm going to be showing you all the steps in the videos going forward as well. How to address the bore score, how to do your new piston rings, and how to reassemble this whole engine back together. I know there's a lot of people that haven't done this, a lot of people that have, put it in fast forwards, and that's purely because, as I've said to many of you guys before, this engine isn't very simple. A lot of people do follow a lot of guides because of the vacuum lines in this car. There's a lot of them and a lot of people ain't sure where they go. And obviously they can skip bits until they're sure of where they go or find out where they go. Obviously, me bearing in mind I've already done this once before, I'm already aware where everything goes on this engine, bearing in mind it's a Tiptronic as well. I know many of you guys were curious to see how you remove the Tiptronic gearbox from the engine as well, because a lot of you are stuck at that point when you've got a Tiptronic and you're not sure how to remove the gearbox and detach it from the engine. So I'm going to be showing you how to do all that as well, because this is the Mercedes 722.6 gearbox. So what we're going to go ahead and do first is obviously we're going to be removing all the airbox and everything from here. Now you are going to have to make sure you disconnect the battery at the front, because you're going to start disconnecting all the ground cables as well when you go underneath, and you've got to disconnect the battery cable as well, which is the positive lead. So make sure to disconnect the battery at the front, leave your trunk open but on the latch, and also leave your rear lid open. Do not shut any of them, because you won't be able to open them because the battery won't be connected. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to take off the air box. So to do that, you just do this. Now I am going to be getting rid of this old intake. You're going to be seeing me put another one on, like I've got the cold air induction feed, because I don't like these split and perish over time. Now all you're going to do is just yank it until it comes off, just like that. You're going to want to disconnect. There's a solenoid right down here at the back. You're going to see it right here. That's lifting up. You're just going to want to disconnect the plug from that right there, and then there's a vacuum line, which I'll show you when we get to it, which just pulls out. So you can hear that it's all whizzing now as well. And what we'll do is we'll stick that back on the airbox, because we don't need to take that out. You then got to just take off this plug, which can be a bit hard to get off, which it is now. And it is connected on to two connectors. I'll show you everything once we get it fully out of here. Remove your oil filler neck out the way, and then the airbox should just come out just like this. Just like that, it comes out the car. And if you'll see here, this is the vacuum line solenoid that I was on about. This is the Handheld solenoid. This is what people end up blanking off, where they blank off this tube here to give more induction sound or more raw sound into the car. This is the solenoid that's actually blanked off. And I'll show you the line that actually goes to this, because you can see the piece right here where it joins onto once the airbox is out the car. So you can see here right in this corner, that's the vacuum line that connects to it, and it comes out from the manifold. You can see here, everything looks an absolute mess because it's never been changed. These are the way these aluminum blocks end up going. Everything ends up corroding, breaking apart. This is why to a lot of people, it's not worth rebuilding these, because it does take a lot of money, because a lot of things break. Now, what you've got to understand is you don't have to really disconnect much from the engine bay on these cars. I'm showing you what we need to disconnect. So if you look just down here, you've got the O2 sensor plugs. There's two there that you need to disconnect. And if you look just over here in the corner, you've got two right there. You need to disconnect these two as well. For that side, you also need to disconnect the engine plug harness, which is up here, which I'll show you to disconnect them, turn them anti-clockwise to release them. We're going to be taking them two off. That's for the transmission and the ECU. We'll take them off. We've also got to take off and drain the CHF fluid out of here, and then take off this reservoir, because we've got to get to the aircon bolt, which is under here. We've also got to disconnect that one as well. Then we've also got to disconnect the power steering lines, which run down here as well, which I'll show you in a minute. So just quickly, I'm going to disconnect all these O2 sensors from here, just like that. And they are all hooked on a bracket, which you're going to have to move them. They're not very hard. And you just want to be easy with these, because you can easily break these O2 sensors. So just be careful when you are pulling them up, because I know very well you can break them, because I ended up breaking one of mine. The connectors on it, I had to buy a new one. So they're all out the car, and you can leave them hanging because they come out with the actual engine carrier. So they'll come out with it anyway, because that's where the cats are connected to. Now we're going to go over this side and we'll do the same thing. So I'll just release them, just like that. And you can probably see, I pull up on the harness and just push them all out. And we'll do the same on this one, just like that again. And just move it out the way, just like that. So now that's all out. Now what you want to do is remove this because that harness ain't going anywhere. Then we'll disconnect the engine wiring harnesses. You'll probably just be able to see my hand getting in here. And it's not easy. It depends on how tight they are, these are very tight. So now you can see both connectors are now removed from the connectors on the car. So now they're ready to go. So these will, after we'll move these into position up here, ready to come down with the engine. So now all the connectors are removed from the ECU wiring harness. What we'll do now is we're going to drain all the coolant and the oil, because I need to drain it all out. I don't know if you can even call that coolant. It doesn't even look pink in there. I think that's where it's just all broken down over the years and nobody's changed it. We're going to be draining all that out. Then we're going to be draining the oil as well, because we need to get it all clear for when I take the engine down. Then we'll come back up here. We have to disconnect all these vapor lines, the fuel line, and everything else that needs to go. So all the coolant pipes ready for the engine to come down, because the rest of the work is going to be underneath on the gearbox and everything else, all the coolant pipes down there, which I'll show you when we go down there. I'm trying to focus up on here, so then realistically we can just literally drop the engine. I'm going to have to release the AC pipes because I don't know if this is gassed or not, probably not. If it's not, it's even better for me, but if it is, we'll have to get that regassed at a later date. It doesn't really bother me, but we are going to get this in the air. I'm going to show you how to drain the coolant from the block so we can get that drained. But you've seen how you remove the ECU wiring harnesses as they counterclockwise. Just turn them. If you can't get your left hand on it because your left hand's the weakest, put your right hand on it and just turn them and it will come off. Do the bottom one first, then the top one. It makes it so much easier to be able to grab hold of them and turn them out. When you put them back on, I would just spray a bit of WD-40 to make them glide on easier and turn easier, because they can be a bit stiff. Got to remember they're plastic, they're right near the engine, so it produces heat. So it becomes very, very hard and also brittle, so you've got to be very careful as well. Okay, so under here, this is your coolant block drain. It's right here. It's located near the water pump hose. This is where we're going to drain the coolant from, because it has to be drained from here. Now to do that, you do need a Torx 30. It's a Torx 30 you're going to use. I mean, some people say about using an Allen key. I surely wouldn't. Not on a rusted bolt like that. It's actually safer to use a Torx 30, because as you know, it will end up stripping with an Allen key. You don't want that, because you need to get that off. You don't want to be drilling that out. So what I'm going to do is use a Torx 30, drain the coolant. We're going to let the coolant flow down. Then I've got to go and remove the cap from the top of the reservoir to let it completely come down, because you're going to see it's only going to trickle a small bit until we open the actual reservoir cap and take it off completely. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. So what it looks like now, we'll have to use an Allen key, but it's just not seem to be turning in. This means this has never been removed before, which isn't a good sign. This car hasn't been looked after and never had its coolant change. On my one, it did come off, but this one is not coming off. So what we're gonna do, try again. Try and crack it loose, it's moving. There we go. It's now moving. Oh, look at all that corrosion. Oh, all white. That shows that this has never been removed before, and that's really, really bad that nobody's ever changed the coolant in these, because this coolant should be changed at least every 3 years, and it's never been done. And you'll be able to see as the coolant comes down, once I open it, just once it beats all this corrosion, I'm gonna have to get a new one of these, a new coolant drain plug, because this is like ridiculous. That's the whole crush washer done for as well. You can see there the coolant colour isn't good. It shouldn't be like this, it's broken down. Let this drain out and then I'll put the plug back on. There'll be a lot of coolant to come out, so we'll just leave that to drain. And you can see now that's starting to slow down now. Finally, I did release the reservoir cap to make it come out quicker. Obviously, you're never going to get the whole coolant out of the system. The only way to do that is to pull all the radiator hoses, which we're not going to be doing. We're just doing focus on the engine side, but this car does take 32 litres of coolant to add, especially being a Tiptronic. So you've got to bear that in mind. So we'll let it keep draining. Then we're going to move on to quickly draining the oil. So we'll drain the oil as well. I'm hoping that ain't going to be seized. The sump plug like this one is all completely seized. Guys, if you are planning to do this, make sure you get yourself a new one of these, because you might end up having to bang this off, and which you won't get it back on. So I'd strongly recommend get yourself a new one of these as well. I know there's a lot of you that want to go as cheap as possible on these to try and rebuild them, but there's going to be a lot of stuff that's corroded and that has to be replaced. So do bear that in mind. You're not going to be able to get out of it. Obviously now what we're going to do, I'm just going to put this back in, just stop it bleeding out, because it's all gone now, which is what we wanted from the block. We'll just tighten it up. I don't want to over tighten it because I've got to remove it again before when I take the engine out. I'm going to have to remove that to put a new one in. So we'll leave it like that, and now we're going to go under and do the oil. So now here's the sump, and this is the sump plug. We are going to be putting a H8 Allen key in there, and we're going to be loosening that so the oil can now drain down as well, because we want the oil drained completely from the engine. Obviously we need all this done before we get the engine out, because obviously when you go to take the valve covers off, as I said to many of you guys before, oil sits in the valleys, it will go everywhere and we don't want that, so we're going to drain it from the bottom. So here we are with our 8mm Allen key, and that one's a bit tight as well, but it released. It means we can get away with using this sump plug again. Now the oil is going to drain out, so I'm just going to be quick at this while we just let it completely drain. Here we go. And look how black that oil is. Now the reason I like to pull it into my pan, which you will see in a second, is because as I'm watching the oil, I'm trying to see here if I can see any kind of metal fragments from obviously the bore score, where it's scored it severely, where there's all metal components in there, and obviously checking for any IMS wear or anything like that. And you can actually see there's all bits in here from where it's been scraping the bores. You can see it clearly in here. And to be honest, I think this is going to be worse than what I actually thought. I will show you guys in a second once it finishes draining, but you can see it all glistening in the oil. So it's not a good sign at all. I think these linings are going to be very bad, but we'll soon find out. I obviously need to check the IMS as well, but as you can see, it's still draining. We'll just wait for it to finish draining, and I can show you guys the oil. You'll be able to see it all in here anyway, it's coming to the top. So it's quite bad, but it's to be expected. Okay, so as you can see now, the oil has stopped draining. I've now put the sump plug back in. So now what we're gonna go ahead and do is move to the top of the car, and we're gonna start removing the last bits from inside the engine bay before we come under here and finish up removing everything we need to drop the engine out from the bottom. Now, as you can see here, we're going to start removing all the AC lines. Now, the first thing to do is to check your CHF fluid and make sure it's not overfilled, because if it's not overfilled up to the filler neck and it's down in the bottom of the reservoir, you'll be able to just disconnect this and leave the fluid in situ, and you can drain it once the engine's out. But a lot of people do top this up, and it ends up filling up right up here to the filler neck, and then you have to drain it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shine a torch in there to be able to see how full it is, and if it's too full, we're going to have to siphon it out. I've got an automatic pneumatic siphon pump to be able to do that, but if I don't have to, I'll leave it. Then I'll take the fluid out once we get the engine out, which I can do after. So let's go ahead and just quickly see, because we need to get this off and then we can remove the AC lines. That's the next step we've got to do. For them, what you're going to have to do is you cannot use an Allen key bolt on these. I see a lot of people trying to use an Allen key bolt, and it ends up stripping these bolts. Now I know they are an Allen key bolt itself, but I prefer to use a Torx Forte to be able to release these bolts, otherwise you end up stripping them. So what we're going to go ahead and do is just check the fluid in there. Okay, so the fluid is quite up here still. It's past this filler point. It's right around here in this level. So I'm gonna have to siphon it out, because otherwise it will go everywhere and we don't want that. So I'm gonna siphon it out quickly. You'll see me doing that, and then we can get this filler neck off, and I'll show you how to disconnect that. So I'm just gonna use my extraction system, and it's gonna be a bit noisy while we do this. You guys will probably hear it as I start sucking it all out, and you'll see it coming up. through the extraction system. So if you just see here, you can see it all coming out. As I do that now, if you ain't got an extraction system like this to be able to extract the fluid, you can use a turkey baster. It will obviously take you a longer amount of time to do it, but this is the easiest way of doing it. So I'm siphoning it all out of the reservoir so I can remove the filler neck. There wasn't much in there to begin with, but there is a lot of people that do overfill these, thinking that the higher the flow, the more the power steering is going to work better. I don't know why people assume that. It's only got to be really at the bottom. You don't really even have to fill it up to the top of this reservoir neck. That's only really when you want to purge the system from obviously removing it. To purge the air out, you fill it up as high as you can so air can't go back in. You can see there, it's all sucking out. It's all done now. So now it should be clear for me to pull out and remove. What we've got to do is be careful taking this out. So obviously now that's all drained, what we're going to go ahead and do is look for the bit to flick it upwards so we can then move it in position and take this out. We're going to have to release this 10mm bolt that is holding on to the actual manifold itself. So you are going to need a 10mm socket, and it's right here, located here, which holds the filler neck onto the manifold itself. It's only a very tiny little bolt. Make sure you don't lose that, otherwise you won't be able to secure your reservoir back up. And you can see there it's already loose. That means someone's actually removed this before and it hasn't been properly seated back onto the reservoir itself. Is probably why it didn't have much fluid. It could actually have a leak. And you just see there how easy that comes out. Now fluid is going to leak out. There's nothing you can really do about it. Best thing to do is to get tissue and just hold it like that so it doesn't go everywhere. And then I'm going to sit this down on the bench. Now we're free to remove the AC line, so I'm just going to crack this one loose straight away. You'll see this bolt release, as you just seen there. That one's all released. And we'll just take that out of the way. And what you can do is just crack that off. And you'll probably hear the AC lines disperse right there. Now what we've got to do is remove this bolt right here, and for this one, now you're going to need obviously a smaller Torx 40 to get to the back of that one. So we get our smaller ratchet and just crack that one loose. Just like that. And now that one's released. So what we'll do, we'll just manually turn that out, just like that. So we can get this other bolt out of here and disconnect this other AC line. You see, just like that, the AC lines are now out of the way. We'll just put that bolt back on there because that's the way you do it. So you don't have to lose them. You can leave them in situ because even when you take the air compressor off, when you strip the engine, you can take them out with the car. Now what we're going to do is we're going to crack all these lines. These are 215mm down here. This is for the power steering lines. We're going to crack them loose, and then we're going to remove the power steering lines from here. So then that way we can disconnect the last bits and then the coolant hoses. So the power steering lines are very, very easy to do. You just push your 15 into there, just like that. Now you have got a locking clip here that you will have to remove, just like that. And then they're ready to remove. As you can see, the 215s, lock it down there and remove it. It's very much easier than it is on a 996 where they sit at the top. You can literally just pull the coolant lines from here. Now what I'm going to do before I pop that, I'm going to get a latex glove and stick the latex glove inside that to stop it leaking all down onto the floor and everything else. Now not everyone does this. A lot of people put a pot here to let it leak out, but I just put a glove because it's easier, because then what I'll do is cable tie it to stop it just leaking out everywhere, because as you guys know, not only is this stuff flammable, it's a nuisance as well when it leaks out from everywhere. And you can see it's leaking out that hole. Now we've got to release this line right here, which is another power steering line. We just get pliers on that and we can just push that off. Now the pipe itself might be a bit seized when we do that, but we can just lift that up like that. And then we'll just try and prise that off. Just like that, it's coming off now. And then we're going to stick that into the glove as well once it pops off, because this one will have a bit coming out of it. as you just seen there. So it's going everywhere already. This is what I didn't want to happen, because obviously it's not nice stuff, this, at all. That's why you put them in the glove. Now I'm gonna wrap a cable tie around that. Just wrap a cable tie around both of them to lock this glove in place so it doesn't get in my way and doesn't keep leaking. Just like that. And that can leak into the glove. Now you want to take your engine wiring harnesses, push the power steering hose that way, and you want to bring this over here and lock it under all the pipes, because you no longer need access there. Next thing we've got to do is release all the coolant lines, and then this vacuum line just down here, which you've got your vacuum line that goes down here. So then you've got to remove this vacuum line, which very, very easy. You just want to take your Jubilee clip off, then you want to just prise it off. It will come, it connects onto your tandem pump. It can be a bit seized at first, and then it's off, just like that. That one's out the way, and you want to keep that out the way because when the engine drops. Now we're going to release the coolant hose. So you can see right here, we've got to now disconnect all the fuel line. So we've got to disconnect this vapor line, like that. That's the first one. Then you want to take out this vacuum line out of there, because this part stays in the car with this, which is the vacuum system. Then you want to take this coolant hose off, which is right here. Just move that out the way. Then you just pull it off like that. Now we need to get the fuel line off. We've got another coolant hose at the back here for the reservoir. I need to get longer pliers to be able to reach down the back here to disconnect that one. And just like that, that's out the way. Now it can be a bit hard to get it off from all the years of being on there. You just got to wobble it just like that, and it will come out. Obviously, these hoses are going to need replacing regardless, because they're just all completely corroded. You can't reuse these whatsoever. Now we're going to disconnect the fuel line, which is at the back here, which just comes off just like that. It's a quick disconnect, and that's now been disconnected. Fuel line's disconnected. Now we're going to disconnect these coolant hoses here, which we're going to have to put a bucket underneath before we release them, because these ones here down the bottom right here will throw coolant everywhere as well, because they hold a lot of coolant inside them. Then we got the one just here as well that needs to be disconnected. This one. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take off the locking clips, because these can become very hard to remove after all the years of corrosion. We're going to have to put a bucket underneath ready to catch all the coolant that's going to come down. So I've now put the bucket underneath ready to catch any coolant that comes out, which it will, as you just seen. As I did say to you, you'd have coolant, then you want to move this coolant hose back towards here, so it's out the way. Now we've got the same for that one. So now we've got to do the other one over the back just here, which is connected. Now our best advice for removing these, in case yours are seized, is to do like I've always done on them. Spray WD-40 to release them, because it will make them release a lot easier than it does trying to fight all the corrosion on them. Now I'm about to pull this one now off as well. And just like that, that's the other one disconnected. And this is because I left them to soak in WD-40 both sides. This is why they come off a lot easier. If you don't do that, these will not come off because they seize to the aluminum pipes, but that's made them come off a lot easier. Even though these have to be replaced, it's just common practice to do that. That's the easiest way to get them off, at least for now. Because if you don't, then what ends up happening is you'll end up with them seizing, you'll end up trying to pierce them, trying to push, and you end up damaging the aluminum pipes trying to get them off. So now they're free. That will come down with the engine along with that hose. Everything's disconnected up here. So everything is now free in the engine bay. So if you can see now, everything is now disconnected in the engine bay. The lambda sensors, the vacuum line to the tandem pump, all the power steering lines, fuel lines, vapor lines, vacuum lines, coolant hoses, everything is disconnected. There really isn't much up here to disconnect. This engine is now ready to go down. Now we've got to go underneath and sort out everything underneath. But up here is all now disconnected. There is nothing else to worry about disconnecting now. So now we're going to move to underneath and I'll show you what you need to remove. So as you can see there, guys, I removed the CV axles from the gearbox side itself. And if you guys know, because it's a Tiptronic, they come with these adapter plates right here. These are the adapter plates that go onto the CV axle, to the gearbox, to the drive shaft ends itself. And I have removed the bolts. Now, one thing I'm going to tell many of you guys is when you're actually removing these, do not use a Torx bit. It will strip the bolts. You need to use an 8mm Allen head bit to release these bolts or you will strip them. I know many of you are going to say, but they're Torx. Correct, they are. But the best way to remove them without stripping them is to use an 8mm Allen key bit. Remember, they're not torqued up that high. I know many people like to think, oh, 60 foot-pounds is a lot of torque. It is, but they're really not that tight at all. And when you go to remove them, I use a breaker bar and I tap on the 8mm Allen key socket onto the CV axle bolts before I unloosen them. They actually just release nice and easy and you'll be able to unloosen them very, very easily all round. Make sure you hold the breaker bar against the bolt with the 8mm Allen key and just turn it, and you lock the brake disc up with either someone holding the brakes or you can put a screwdriver in the brake disc that locks down onto the caliper to be able to rotate each bolt in turn. That is how I managed to do it, so they are off on the car already. Just remember your adapter plates that go behind, you'll need to remove them as well, as they'll drop out when you lower the engine. Next thing you can see is I removed the gearbox support mount. Now, this is very, very simple in how it holds on. You need to remove this before you think of doing anything else. It's easier to get it off now because the coolant hoses are held on that gearbox bracket mount. They all clip onto that. These are all 15mm nuts all round, so you've got 4 of them. They're not tight at all. There's only 4 studs that are built onto the chassis itself. You unscrew the 4 15mm nuts from here and take out these 15mm from the gearbox mount itself, because this is where the bracket usually sits onto, is on the gearbox mount side itself. And then what you do is just take the gearbox mount off. You have to do that before, because if you try and lower these with the engine, you end up stripping these studs on the chassis side, and you don't want that because these are fixed to the actual chassis itself. These, however, are 15mm as well. Make sure you take them out. You unloosen these first, which are these 15mm studs right here, and then take out these. And then to put it back on, do this first, tighten these ones up on the engine mount side, then put the bracket back on onto the studs, tighten them down. Remember, they are not tight, and you'll notice that when you go to release them, they don't tighten up as tight as you would think. Do bear that in mind. The same for these to the engine mount as well. Very, very easy. You can remove them with a spanner if you don't have a socket. That's what needs to be removed first. And like I said, there's no point you guys watching me. They're just 15mm nuts here, 15mm bolts here. Very easy to remove. Anyone can basically do it. So if you can see here, this is a C4S. It's different to the 2S. And as you can see, this has a prop shaft that drives the front wheels. So as you can see, it actually connects onto the gearbox right here. I've already actually released that. These are held on by 3 15mm bolts. They are not tight at all. You can easily take them out of a normal 15mm spanner because they're really not tight. I unloosened all 3 of them, and you can either do it 2 ways. You could put the car in neutral and turn it over by hand to get to every bolt, but you're gonna have to have someone hold the brakes, or you can just keep putting it in park every time. You need to lock it up where you need to release them, because otherwise the prop shaft will spin. Once you get all the 15mm bolts out, you're gonna need to use a pry bar to push back to pop it off and away from the gearbox. As you can see here, I've already popped it off and it's away and it's all loose now, if you can see there. So therefore, it's ready to actually come out. The prop shaft probably dropped down when we dropped the engine, but apart from that, it's already out and unloosened. So if you have a 2S, you can actually skip this part because this part's not relevant to you, but if you do have a 4S, you are gonna need to remove this and remove the 3 bolts. They're 15mm as well. So majority of bolts all around here underneath are 15mm. You will have to take out them 3 bolts. Do not take out the ones from behind, it's the ones at the front that you see firstly here. And then a pry bar, I know it will feel like it's not coming, but it will pop off. You just have to give it some force. Obviously this Weber bushing looks a bit torn and broken, so that's gonna have to be replaced as well anyway, which we'll do once the engine's out. So that is how you remove the prop shaft from the gearbox on these cars as well, especially on a Tiptronic. Next thing up here I've removed is the gear shifter cable, which is up here. You can see it all flopping about. It's already been removed. Again, very, very easy. Use a pry bar to pop it off the ball joint itself. You should get a pry bar and pop it off. And then for the shifter cable itself, which sits in this holder, you just, again, use a pry bar and just push it backwards against it and it will pop out of the holding bracket as well. Very, very simple on these to remove that. You've also got your gearbox connection plug that you'll need to take out as well. Disconnect it from this side. This is the side that stays in the car. That's the side that comes down with the car. You can probably see the cross members off and also the drop links are off as well. Now the drop links you're not going to be able to save. You do have to cut them off because they seize completely. So you will have to cut them off. I've also took out the cross member. The cross members are 16 and 18 mil. So the nuts are 18 mil, the bolts are 16 mil. You only have to take out the two from the bottom. The two at the top stay in situ because basically it clamps the cross member at the top and then you bolt it through the bottom. So you don't have to take out the nut or the bolt from the two top ones, left or right. Just unloosen them enough so the actual cross member just drops down. It's only literally held on by grooves and it just clamps together and holds it. The bottom ones are what actually just hold it in, lock it in. These have to be removed, those you won't clear the cross member out of here at all. Take these two bolts out, you might have to knock them out because they are Loctited in. And get them out and then you'll be able to drop the cross member. 16 and 18 mil, remember that guys, and you're gonna need some long spanners to get up there because it's very tight up there as well. But like I said, the nuts on the top sides can stay in on the bolts. Do not remove them because you'll find it very hard to put them back in after with the engine in the way. Obviously, as I said, sway bars come off. We had to cut off the drop links purely because they wouldn't actually come off. So I just cut them off because they're seized, as many of you guys know. It's common for them seized, they're on the rear with all the salt on the roads. They just rust and you can't get them off no other way. The rear drop links are very, very easy and very cheap to replace anyway because they know most people are going to cut them off, so do bear that in mind. They're not expensive. It's just easier to buy new ones than to be fiddling about with these old ones and trying to work them free and work them loose and then struggle to get them back on as well. So therefore, we cut them off and that's all done. The next things you're going to be seeing me remove are these two coolant pipes here. These are going back to the transmission cooler lines. These are for the transmission. These have coolant in them as well. These are the two we're going to be removing next. These can be a bit stiff. On my one, I end up replacing these because they were a bit corroded and done for, so I just replaced them. It just made sense because look how perished these ones are. So you just unhook them locking clips right there, pull them back, and then you're going to have to use a screwdriver to push them off because they are very, very tight where they've never been removed in their life before. So we're going to do that. There's two of them. They both have to come off because again, they come out with the engine. So we're going to do that as well. The next one on here that you have to remove is this one as well, this locking clamp here, this little hose here that goes onto this right here, which is the coolant shut-off valve. This has to be disconnected. It needs to come away. It's only a little hose that goes onto this big hose right up here. Very, very tiny. Just take it off and that's it. That's the only other hose. And that will be all your coolant hoses removed from the transmission side. This hose is very simple. It doesn't leak much coolant. That's the shut-off valve. Clamp it together, poise it off, and you'll notice there won't be much coolant that's there to come out. Okay guys, so now what we're gonna go ahead and do is just remove these coolant pipes. So I've got my special pliers for this because these are quite a bitch to remove. So we're just gonna push them back. As you can see, they don't really go back because of all the corrosion, but you can get them back just like that. We'll get that one back and then we're gonna have to pull this one down so we can then lock this one up and push this one back as well. Can be quite a nuisance to release. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do is get a screwdriver to press these off. We've got a coolant bucket right here as well to catch all the coolant that's gonna come out, and a lot comes out of these two hoses. As I say to everyone, if you like a coolant shower, do this job because this will give you a proper coolant shower if you like to be showered in coolant. I can tell you that straight away. Then we'll just stick the screwdriver around until it just comes off. You can see already there the coolant coming out. You can see how much coolant comes out. And you just leave that coming out. Then we'll pull the other one once that finishes draining. So now we'll go and pull the next one. And again, you get to see there all the coolant coming out. Again, you can actually see how much actually comes out coolant out of these cars. It is a lot. But now you see why I replaced the hoses as well, guys, because they can become a bit stiff to remove. If you ever have to remove them again, you have to deal with that. So that's now them 2 coolant pipes removed. So now we've got this one right here, we've got to remove. As I said to you before, this is a tiny one. This is not really one you have to worry about too much, but it's always worth having a bucket because you never know what might come off. And this hose corrodes quite a lot. As you can see, nothing really come out of it. As you saw there, there's nothing much out of that one. So that's the last of the coolant hoses now released. There's no more to actually come off now. So now we've just got to disconnect the 2 ground cables, which I'll show you in a minute. The positive battery cable, it connects to the gearbox, and then I can show you how to lower the engine. Okay guys, so if you can see here, this is the battery cable. Now this is the cable that usually breaks down. You can see how hard it is to actually get to because this runs above on top of the engine, underneath the manifold and connects to the starter motor. As you can see, these are the 2 cables removed from it. So these are the battery positive cable and the power distribution cable, which actually gives power to obviously the starter motor and all the ancillaries, the alternator on the actual engine itself. And it runs through the car, through the center console and down here. Now you've got to be careful to make sure you remove this because if you break that cable, you will be running underneath the car all the way back through another cable, and the cable is not cheap. Now to remove these, there is a 30mm nut right here. This flap is closed like that. You open it up and you can see it's got a positive battery thing on it. So you just remove it. Then you undo the 13mm nut that's here, and then you take off these 2 cables. Make sure to take these off. They come off both together, they go in like that on top of there, and then you just literally put the 13mm nut on. I've already removed them. They are now off, and that's what you want to take off. Do not leave these on because you will snap them, and then you will be putting in a new cable through to the power distribution box, and it's not easy at all. The next one is this ground cable right here. It goes up here, if you can see where my hand is, where the cable goes, and it's held on again by another 13mm nut, which is right there. Now that can be quite corroded. You will have to bang a 13mm socket on there. It will seem like it won't fit, but it is a 13mm. Do not use anything else because you will strip that nut. Do make sure that you will have to bang it on. It will just be corrosion what ain't fitting on. So make sure you use a 13mm socket to get that off, and you will need a socket because you won't get it off with a spanner because it's on too tight from all the corrosion. And you just leave the ground cable intact with the engine, which is bolted to the valve cover. Make sure you disconnect that. A lot of people who do lower the engine, I've seen it many times, end up lowering it and forgetting they've got this intact, and you only notice it once the engine's coming down that it's still intact. Don't do that, because obviously, yes, it is easy to replace, but it beats the object of breaking something to then have to pay more money to actually replace it. Then it's finding one, because it is a common problem because people forget or they corrode or this or that, you know, they're very hard to get hold of, these cables. So do make sure to release it. 30mm nut right there, or you can release it up here if you really wanted to from the valve cover and leave it in situ with the car, but I prefer to take it off from here and take it off with the car. They're the 2 cables you must release. They're the only ones. Release them, guys. It's gonna cost you a lot more money. So if you made it this far, then it's time to drop the engine. And if you could see right up here, where my finger is, there's the engine mount bolt. These are 18mm bolts that you're gonna need to release. Now, I know many of you are probably questioning why I haven't removed the bumper. As many of you guys see a lot of people removing the bumper to get the engine out. You do not have to do that. You can drop this engine and put it back in with all the exhaust in situ and without the bumper being removed if you know how to do it. I've done it enough times to know how to drop this engine and put it back in with everything in situ and the bumper especially. Those are the bolts up there you need to remove. There's 2 of them on either side. They're 18mm, you can see they're quite corroded. Most of the time they come off, but getting them back on, you end up stripping the threads due to the engine mounts being so corroded. When we get them off, I'm gonna be testing the engine mounts, because if they're badly worn or flexing a lot, then I'm gonna be replacing them anyway. Same thing here, you can actually see this one a lot clearer. There's the other bolt right there for the engine mount, and that's what you need to take out as well to lower the engine. There's another one right there, there's only 2 of them, and that will drop the engine down, ready to be dropped. Everything is now ready to go. So those are the 2 bolts we're gonna be releasing. As you can see, you're not gonna be able to see me do that because I'm gonna be having a hydraulic table under here while I unbolt it so it drops down. So that's why I'm showing you now before I go ahead and do that. Now up here to release the transmission, there's two 15mm bolts, one in each corner. You've got one here and one in the corner here between both of the coolant pipes. You'll look up and you'll see the two 15mm bolts. I don't know if I can move this so you guys can see, but you can possibly just see it there. In the corner, there's one there, and then you've got one right here as well. You might be able to just make out it right there in the corner. These are the two 15mm bolts. You're going to have to release that and drop the whole transmission down off the transmission mount itself from the chassis. So that's what we've got to release. There's only 4 bolts now, and then that's the engine gonna come down. So do bear that in mind. 2 15s here and 2 18s at the back for the engine mount itself. Okay guys, so what I'm actually doing now, if you can see, I've got the hydraulic table under the car, and I'm just positioning it to be able to capture the engine and the gearbox at the same time. So I'm just moving it around till I get it in situ to be able for it all to drop, because you don't want to only grab half of it, so you just move it in line. So that way the handle can come out and everything can come out together, which it should do now. So I'm just lowering the lift down. You should see the engine touch down onto the table. And then what you'll be able to see now is the engine coming down onto the table. Now obviously we don't want it too far away from the table, but it seems to be sitting on there perfectly. Just need to check the gearbox, because obviously you want the gearbox balanced as well properly. But I think what I'm going to do is lift it up a bit and then push it more under. So we'll just push it a bit more under here, because really we need it to capture everything. So we'll just do that. Yep, so now that's perfect. So what we'll go ahead and do is we'll now release all the bolts for the engine mount and the transmission mount and get this engine out of here. So you guys will now get to see the engine drop from up here when I release the engine mounts. That's one side down. You guys would have seen the engine just drop. Now it's time to lift the car up and the engine should drop down. Just want to make sure we release fuel line out of its holder, which we've just done, and the rest now should come up. You guys will now see that the engine now clear the body. Making sure nothing's trapped up on anything as it all removes, which is now down, so we'll just move the lift fully up. And if you can see there guys, that's a successful engine removal. The engine is now out the car. It's now sitting on the trolley. What I'm gonna do is move it into the corner now so we can start stripping this engine down. As you see, it did come out of all the back boxes where people say it doesn't come out without the bumper coming off. It come out very, very easy. Depends on how you're doing it. I know most of you guys ain't gonna do it on a 2-post lift. Most of you are gonna rebuild this on the floor and get your engine out on the floor, but on a 2-post lift, it's very, very easy to get them out. Engine's now out, and the next video you'll be seeing is us stripping all this engine down so you can see where everything goes and everything that needs replacing and so on and so on. But that is the full engine removal of this car. Now the engine's out of the car. I hope many of you guys have enjoyed this video. Stick around because we're gonna be doing the tear down, show you all the bits that gonna be taken out and be replaced. And you guys are gonna be watching me rebuild all this again, like I did on my other one. We're gonna be showing you what needs to be replaced, what you can't reuse, and why it can't be reused, and so on and so on. I'll show you where all the vacuum lines go and how to reconnect everything back up to put it back into the car.